In this video, we will be discussing the first chapter of history, where, when, and how. So we start by discussing what is history. History, as we know, is the study of the past. It helps us get information about the people that lived in the past, the kind of lifestyle they were having, the economic situation, or the financial situation they were living in, the kind of society that they were living in, what clothes they wore, what rulers were ruling the different parts of cities, what were the battles that people fought, and how they lived. So, whatever we study about our past is history. Why is it important for us to study history? History is important because it helps us examine the facts and help us know the truth. It helps us learn from our mistakes that we might have made in the past so that we do not repeat the same mistakes again in future. It gives us a sense of identity by telling us where we came from and who were our ancestors. It helps us understand our present by helping us know how historic events have shaped our life and how our present is being impacted. For example, our present life would have been very, very different had India not gained independence from the Britishers. So, because of an event that happened in history, our lives have changed from the fate that we were about to have if that particular event did not occur. Lastly, it makes us more tolerant towards people in our diverse society by helping us accept and appreciate the differences. Now, history could is a very vast subject to study. That is why it is divided into two parts. History is the written account of events, that is, when humans learned how to write. However, prehistory is the time when humans did not know how to write. So, when we are studying history, we need to know the time and date as they are very, very important while studying history. So, we need to know the order in which the events occurred in order to study the past correctly. In order to do this, a timeline becomes very helpful. A timeline basically helps us depict the events in order of their occurrence on a particular line. So, if suppose we consider this to be a timeline, the center or the midpoint of it is going to be the event of the birth of Christ. We consider this as the birth of Christ. Whatever happened before the birth of Christ is termed as the BC period, and whatever happens after the birth of Christ is termed as the AD period. So BC stands for before Christ, AD stands for Anno Domini. However, today historians prefer using the term BCE, which stands for before Common Era, and instead of AD, they prefer using CE, which stands for Common Era. Now, other than this, you might have also heard people use terms like century, decade, millennium, era. These are also just other ways of telling time in history. Now, let us look at this in detail. So, when we talk about a decade, it's a period of 10 years. When we talk about century, it's a period of 100 years, and a millennium is a period of 1000 years. Now, how do we name or call or understand the centuries? Now, instead of, if I were to say that a particular event took place in the first 100 years of CE period, remember, children, that we use the centuries or we count the centuries only in the CE period. So, if I were to tell you that a particular event took place in the first 100 years of the CE period, instead of saying that, I can simply say that a particular event took place in the first century. So, what all would be the years that would fall in the first century? They could be any year that could come between 1 to 100 would come in the first century. That is 55, 67, 89, 23, 45, 75, 89. All these years would come in the first century. However, the moment I complete 100 years and enter 101st year, I have entered the second century. So all the years falling between 101 to 200 are going to be the part of second century. Similarly, all the years falling between 1900 years to 1901 to 2000 years are going to be part of the 20th century, because we have completed 1900 years and we have entered 1901st year, which is in the 20th century. Similarly, if I were to ask you that in which century would 1823 CE fall? So the answer would be in the 19th century, because when we completed 1800 years, we completed the 18th century. And the moment we moved on into 1801 year, we entered the 19th century. So the year 1823 would fall in the 19th century. By that logic, if we are in the year 2001 to 2100, we are in the 21st century, because currently we are in the year 2021. So, since timeline is very, very important in giving us information and helping us study history, let us learn how to read a timeline or how to depict the events on a timeline. If I were to ask you which is the earliest date amongst the years 140 BCE, 140 CE, 265 CE, and 265 BCE, how would you tell me that? So let us use a few rules in order to arrange these dates in a chronological order or in the order of their occurrence. Remember, we always arrange the dates from the one in the one which is the oldest to the one which is the most recent one. So the first rule is going to be segregate or check whether a particular date is in the BCE period or in the CE period. Now, out of the 4 dates that I have given you, 2 of them are in the BCE period, that is before Common Era, and 2 of them are in the CE period, that is in the Common Era. So on a timeline, I am going to depict these 2 events. I know 2 of them are going to be on the left hand side and 2 of them are going to be on the right hand side. Moving on, the second one is I'm going to see the biggest year in the BCE period and consider it the oldest year in the history. So the biggest year in the BCE period from the options that I have given you is 265 BC. So that is the oldest date. I'm going to arrange it in the leftmost corner because it is the oldest date in history. Next, I'm going to see what is the next date in the BCE period. Here we just have two. So the next one is going to be 140 BC. I'm going to arrange it over here. In the middle, we have the birth of Christ, which is the event that separates BCE from CE. And then we are going to we are going to start with the smallest year in the CE period, that is 140 out of the 2 options. And next, we are going to write the bigger year in the CE period, that is 265 AD. So this is how we arrange the dates in a timeline. We put the oldest date in the BCE period, the greatest date in the BCE period first, as this is the oldest date. So the one that is on the leftmost end of a timeline is the oldest date, and the one that is on the rightmost end of a timeline is the closest date to the present year. So if I were to ask you which is the oldest date, the oldest one would be 265 BC, as it is marked on the leftmost end of the timeline. Now, what all are the things that you would see on a timeline? A timeline helps us show the dates and the year. It tells us whether a particular event occurred in the BCE period or in the CE period. And moreover, it specifies what event occurred. So example, here there is the timeline of Indus Valley civilization. It marks that the event that happened here was the early settlement. It happened around 4000 BCE. Then next was towns and cities were built. So towns and cities were built between 3500 BCE and 2600 BCE. So it shows the dates, years, whether it is in the BCE period or CE period, and lastly it tells us what was the particular event that occurred. Now, a timeline can also be used to help us know how far apart are 2 events from each other. So if I were to ask you how many years apart are 15 BC and 10 AD, what are we supposed to do is we'll draw a timeline, we'll mark the birth of Christ as the center event that we take in the middle. Then we will mark 15 BC on the left hand side, which is the BC period, and we mark 10 AD on the right hand side in the CE period. So these 15 years, that means from the birth of Christ to 15 BC, 15 years have passed, and from birth of Christ to 10 AD, 10 years have passed. So in order to know how far apart in time are 15 BC and 10 AD, all we have to do is simply add 15 and 10 years, which will give us a total of 25 years. So we would know that 15 BC and 10 AD or CE are 25 years apart in time. Now, next we look at the geographical framework of history. We study about the geographical framework because we know that it has a very powerful impact on history. Thus, history of Indian subcontinent has also been influenced by the geographical features of the Indian subcontinent, and these features are the Himalayas. The Himalayas basically served as a barrier against the foreign invaders and protected the Indian subcontinent from the attacks. So, this area where the Himalayas are being marked, this is where we have our Himalayas, and because they are huge, humongous mountain ranges, they protected India from any kind of invasion. On the other hand, we have seas and oceans, as we can see that India is a peninsula region because it is surrounded by sea on three sides. Hence, it also protected India from attacks because it is difficult to attack from seas and oceans. However, on the other hand, it encouraged trade relations and helped India build colonies overseas, especially in the Southeast Asian countries and in Sri Lanka. Next, we have the northern plains that are located in the basin of River Indus. This is River Indus over here, and the Ganga basin. So, over here, we have our northern plains above the Vindhya range. So these northern plains were, because they were drenched by the two basins of the rivers Indus and Ganga, they were very, very fertile, and that is what attracted a lot of rulers to this particular region, and they established their powerful kingdoms in this particular area. So, examples of the rulers who preferred establishing their kingdoms in this area were the Mauryas, the Guptas, and the Mughals. Next, we have the Deccan Plateau region. Deccan Plateau region is separated from the northern plains by Vindhya and Satpura ranges. You can see in the map over here, the Vindhya and the Satpura ranges separate the northern plains from the Deccan Plateau region. And this was the growth place of many regional kingdoms, majorly of South Indian kingdoms. Moving on, we see that we need certain tools to help us study history. Now, we use archaeology to majorly study the prehistoric time, because at that time humans did not know how to read and write, and that's why we don't have a written record of anything. That is why we use archaeology to study the prehistoric time. Archaeology is the study of remains of human life from the past. The objects from the past are excavated or dug up from the ground, and they are examined or studied. These objects that are found at archaeological sites, they are called artifacts. Now, these could be anything that was made by humans in the past, like toys, tools, ornaments, weapons, pottery. So, I have shown you pictures of some examples of artifacts. These artifacts were made by people in the past, and they help us know about the lives of people, like what they ate, what kind of occupation or jobs they might have taken up, what were the trading relations, what were the kind of gods they might have worshipped, what kind of dresses they were wearing, what kind of ornaments they were wearing, and how they cremated their dead. Now, other than this, what we also used as a tool to study history are manuscripts, inscriptions, and coins. Now, manuscripts are documents that have been written by hand, so that this belongs definitely to the history period, because history was the time when humans learned how to read and write. So, they are documents that are written by hand. The manuscripts were originally written on either stone or clay tablets. I have given you, shown you example over here. They were written on stone and clay tablets that are shown here in the picture. They were also written on dried palm or bark of trees. However, between 700 to 800 CE, people started writing on dried animal skin called parchment. So this is a man making parchment. And paper, however, was used around 15th century CE. Now, Indian manuscripts, if we specifically talk about, they were usually written in Sanskrit, Prakrit, or Pali. In the in South India particularly, Tamil was used to write manuscripts. Now, when we consider the manuscripts of India in ancient Indian history, we find three types of manuscripts. First is religious literature. These help historians know about the nature of society, religion, politics of ancient India. So, whatever is mentioned about the religious aspects, the traditional customs of Indian subcontinent is comes under the religious literature. Example, the Vedas, the Ramayana, and Triptakas. So next category is the secular literature. So whatever subject are taken up except for religion, all the subjects like politics, grammar, medicine, law, society, etc., all these come under secular literature. An example of secular literature is uh, Banabhatta's Harsha Charitra and Arthashastra written by Kautilya in 4th century BCE. Lastly is the traveler's account. Now, in history, what used to happen was that people used to travel from different places to discover new places, and a lot of people did visit Indian subcontinent as well. So when they came to India, they saw what looked around the place that they were staying, and whatever they found interesting and whatever they were observing around themselves, they started taking a note of that. So these travelers who took account of who noted down whatever was happening around them became the travelers account manuscripts. So these are basically writings of foreign travelers about India and its people. Example of travelers accounts are Hyun Sang's book that he wrote in the 7th century CE. He was a Chinese traveler. He came during the rule of Emperor Harsha. And second example is Megasthenes' Indica, that was written under the rule of Chandragupta Maurya. These are examples of some manuscripts. This is Yajurved written in Sanskrit and Hyun Sang's traveler's account. This is Arthashastra written on palm leaf by Kautilya. Next, we discuss about inscription. So inscriptions, as we studied, is another tool that helps us study history. In ancient days, what rulers did were they had people narrate the stories or write down the stories or their praises about their battles, their strength, and how good they were to people. They had all this written down on monuments or objects, pillars, walls, palaces, etc., so that people would read about how great their ruler is. Moreover, they also, if there was an important information or a message that they wanted their subjects or the people of the nation to know, they would have that information or notice also written on or inscribed on these walls. So basically, uh, whatever writings, the stories of battles, messages for the subjects, whatever was being written on these buildings of temples, palaces, caves, forts, pillars, these engraved writings were called inscriptions, and they help us know about the wars and the victories of various rulers and what were the messages that they were trying to convey to their subjects. Also, when a particular inscription is being read and understood, this is called decipherment. That is, you're making meaning out of the inscription. And the study of inscriptions is called epigraphy. An example of inscription is edicts of Emperor Ashoka, which contain messages by Ashoka to his subjects. So these are examples of some inscriptions that you find. This is inscriptions on Qutub Minar, and these are Egyptian inscriptions. Lastly, we come to coins and seals. Study of coins is called numismatics, and coins were issued by the rulers to use goods and services, just like we use money these days. Thus, the information that was placed on coins can be helpful in knowing a lot about people from the past. Example, the year it belongs to, the faces of it contains information about the faces of the rulers, the interests and national symbols, the battle scenes, the kind of metal that was being used. All this information can help us know what was the situation in the past in which these coins were being used. So historians use this information to check the facts from history. On the other hand, when we talk about seals, these contain certain inscriptions along with a figure of God or an animal, and they are known to be used as a symbol of a particular ruler or a particular civilization. For example, seals initially were used as the kind of emblem or national symbol that we might use today. Example, if you have your passport. So if you check the passport of India, it has the national emblem of India, or we might also call it the seal of India. That's how you know that it belongs to a particular nation, to a particular ruler. Similarly, the passport of UK is going to have the seal of UK present on the passport. This passport of US, United States, is going to have the seal of United States on the passport. So similarly, seals were used in the olden times by the rulers to mark their uh, mark their ownership with a particular thing or object. So here we have, I've shown you certain seals. These have inscriptions and a figure of a god, and here we have inscriptions along with figures of animals. So these were the seals belonging majorly to the Indus Valley civilization. And here we have coins. So coins, as we discussed, can be very, very helpful in finding out a lot of information about the time it was being used. So here is the coin of Indian currency. It's rupees only. As you can see, it's half a rupee. It belongs to India, and the year is 1944. So you see different patterns and designs over here. And on the back side of this coin in 1944 is the picture of the Emperor George VI. So this was the time, since 1944 was the time when India was being governed by the Britishers. That's why we have the picture of a British ruler. However, when we look at the coin from 1989, this was issued on the occasion of centenary of Jawaharlal Nehru. And here we have the picture of Pandit Nehru, because he was the ruler then. We have India's national emblem. We have languages, both Hindi and English, and we have the value of the coin. So here you would see that only English is used. So somebody in the olden times who did not know how to read English would not be able to know what is the value of this coin. However, after independence, it was Hindi and English, both were used on the coin. And we have Satyamev Jayate also written over here, and the picture of a ruler. So this was it for the first chapter of history.